Closing the pool with the help of J. Johnny. We're going to first cover the pool, shocking the water before we do that. We put in 3 gallons of shock, or you could do 2 gallons of shock and a gallon of algicide. I haven't seen any big difference. Jay's just taken out some of the major leaves that are floating around, and then we're going to put the cover on after we shock it. We've wheeled the cover out here. We poured the shock in. This has to run for at least 3 hours, but it'll run fine with the cover over it. This cover is unique because we have the stairs at the end with a rail between them. So we'll see when we get to that end how it's a little bit weird. Okay, we've unrolled the solar cover. This is the main cover, the winter cover. And you see that the top surface is up. Those are the ones that go to the end where the step is. So now we're going to go around and loosen all these turnbuckles so that they're ready to accept the cover. This tool is the thing that we use for both pulling the sides down, spring connectors out, and it also has the big Allen wrench in here for loosening these. So J. Johnny will pull that out. No, pull that. There you go. So we start at the far end, putting the rubber spring covers over both the spring and that braided piece. And then we'll start next alternating one side and the other side all the way up the line. As we're alternating the sides, the tension's going to build up. And so John will show how we take this pipe that's got a notch in it. The notch goes over the far end of the bolt. So he puts it through the hole. We pull it so that the notch is over the end. And then we have a lot of video of mine. Just wait a second. Okay, so I'm gonna pull on this and John's gonna step on the thing. Go ahead, Jay. All the way, quick. Yeah. Especially as they get tighter, one motion is good. Otherwise it's gonna go fing. Okay. Okay, we've done them back and forth, alternating all the way down to the end. And because of this stair with the rail in the middle, which they never do these days, we have to do the connection here between the two sides. Otherwise you'll tend to rip the cover. So we do this connection because you can't do it after you've got all these things tight. So again, you just make this connection first so that this thing stays about the same width as where it's joined. Because you can't do this after you pull these other ones tight. And there's the final. And John, thanks so much. Everything's tied down. Tomorrow we'll do the filter, the pump, and anything that's left. Okay, we're gonna finish closing the pool today with working on the pump, the filter, and the heater. Get those closed up for the winter. And so we'll do those piece by piece. Okay, I got the pump is running and the heater is still connected. It's saying low because the pump was just turned on. There's not enough flow to register properly. Okay, but it's on standby, so it wouldn't heat anyways. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just unplug both of them. You see the heater is this outlet. The pump has a whole different connector on it, much bigger, higher current. So we'll unplug those and then we'll start on each one. In order to both tighten and loosen the connections on the filter and the pump and the heater, you really need a strap wrench. So it's just a wrench with a rubber thing on there. You know, you could use a belt or something, but this thing is so much better. And I'll show you it in action. But in essence, if you look at this thing, there's an arrow on it, and that shows you that that's the direction when you turn it, that you can either tighten, or if you had to loosen, you know, you flip it over and do it in the other direction. And obviously this thing comes out of here, so it makes it really easy to put onto these large connectors, and then you just tighten it up on the connector and turn it in the tighten or loosen direction. Some of the connectors actually show you which direction is tighten or loosen. Some you have to. There's an end plug in this connection, which you can just take, you know, there's a big slot on it, so you take and just get this loosened, and again you can then take out this end plug. Just set this aside. We're going to store it with the filter when we're done. So now I have to connect this little adapter here, and this is just so that the diatomaceous earth that's in the filter and the water can drain out, and they just kind of go on the lawn and supposedly don't do any harm. Who knows? This is a little finicky, so, but in essence, I'm going to turn this off, but in essence you just slide the end of this over the end of that. Now sometimes you have to loosen this. This is a ball valve. When we turn this, in this direction is blocking, in this direction it lets flow. So if we turn this, we are now draining. And I say sometimes you have to loosen this one because it's tight on the ball valve. It seems to be working fine. And you can see the water, and most of the diatomaceous earth will stay in the filter, but we're just draining the water out of the filter. We're going to take the strap wrench again and disconnect this connection of the filter, and this goes over into the heater, so we'll have to disconnect this end too, and this whole pipe will come out and free, and we store that in the shed. Be handy to know, because some of these there's no markings. You just have to try to turn them. If they don't turn and you've tried pretty hard, then you're turning in the wrong direction. This one, facing it, you're turning it clockwise. You know, clockwise is the classic tightening direction, but in this case it's what the thing is threaded into. So this is threaded like this, so if you make note of this connection at the top of the filter turns this way, which again is clockwise, removing it. Okay, and what's coming out of here is this. Okay, now this one does have an O-ring in it, and I'll show you how we handle that. The other end also has a very unique ring, and we'll store that so that we don't lose these. It's not that they're expensive, it's just that they're really ridiculously hard to identify if you don't have it. You know, it's not like you can bring the heater to the store and say, hey, here's the ring I need, and you know, the heater's 5 or 6 years old and they say we have no idea what you have. So just make sure you store these O-rings with care. So now I'm going to go down here and take this end off, and this one may have a marking on it that says which direction, but if not, I'll show you. Okay, this end turns counterclockwise, which is the normal loosen direction. It's because it's tightening onto these male threads that are on the heater. So we loosen this whole pipe is going to come off now. Which it does with gusto. Okay, so two things. There's an O-ring here that you do not want to lose. And so I'm going to have to set the camera down, but basically I take a plastic bag, put it over that end and tape it down so that ring can't fall out, because I store this pipe in the shed. Okay, but this pipe goes in just like this, connects here, and goes to there. The other pipe to the heater comes out of the ground, so you don't disconnect both ends because one goes right into the cement. Okay? The second O-ring that's really important is right here. And these, again, we're going to put these in a bag and tie them on. There's going to be two of these, one here and one here. We'll take that and I'll show you some, and this is a drain plug for the heater, which we'll take out. We put all those in a plastic bag and hang them from here so we know exactly where they are. There's the plastic bag taped onto this end so that O-ring can't fall out in the shed and just get lost. So this thing's going to go to the shed. And now we're going to take this other one off. And I might as well, before I do that, show you this. This is the drain plug for the heater. There's some water in here that if it froze in the winter, it could cause damage. So this is also going to go in the bag with the O-rings. So we just take this out. And see, hardly anything comes out, but that's because the heater isn't on and nothing's flowing. That's a drain plug. We put that in a bag with the O-ring, and we're going to have an O-ring from this one. I got to put the strap wrench on this one. This one turns in the same direction as this other one, which is counterclockwise, which is what you'd expect. The difference here is this pipe, other end goes into the ground. So when we pull this off, this thing hasn't got anything supporting it. So what I do is I take a cinder block and move it over and put it in under this so it's not just hanging in the air. Because if you broke that connection to the ground, that's call somebody up and hope they can fix it. So we take this, move the cinder block in under it so it's got a nice solid foundation. We have the cinder block in under it, not going anywhere. That's great. Got to take this O-ring out. Hopefully it's slimy. It should be slimy. That means it's got silicone on it, hasn't dried out. And there's that. So basically we're going to have three things in this bag, and I'll show you it hanging on the thing when I'm done. But you got two O-rings and the drain plug for the heater. The only other thing that we do to the heater other than just closing it up is there's a valve that supplies the gas to the heater. So this aluminum colored pipe has got a valve. And again, valves usually are set up so that if they're going in the direction of the valve, that means they're on. If they're turned at 90 degrees, that means they're off. So you want to turn the gas off. And you do that by just going like that. Gas is off. If you try to start the heater in next season and this is off, it will not start because it won't have any gas. So you need to remember this, but you don't want to leave the gas on all winter. So I've coiled up the power cord, hung that over this inlet to the heater, and then taken a cable tie and tied the bag there so we make sure we don't lose those parts. I'm going to work on the pump now, but we will cover the heater afterwards. Everything gets covered up. Okay, with the filter now, we've drained the water out. I'm going to disconnect that, and it's disconnected from this end, so I should be able to lift the filter up and just carry it out to an easier place to work on it. Okay, it's not actually connected to the bottom. It sits on the bottom in a little pocket that's made for it. So I'm going to disconnect the water hose that I used to drain it, lift it up, and set it out on the deck. Okay. So it's just setting out on the deck. We can take this off. I usually use it to catch. We're going to take all these bolts out. The bolts always come up from the bottom. The head is on the bottom. On the head there's a washer, and there's a washer and a nut on the top, and all these things are stainless steel. So if you do lose one, if it drops down into the crack on the deck or whatever, just make sure when you go to the hardware, take one of the other ones and say you need stainless steel. Otherwise, the chlorine will rust them very quickly. When we're tightening this thing up next season, you start with them loose and you tighten them kind of in sequence so that you compress the seal on the thing more or less evenly. We don't have to be too careful at this point. We're just going to take all these out, and I usually set them in here so I make sure I don't lose any. It's also maybe helpful to set this thing up on like a bench, because you're kind of bent way over taking out a lot of bolts. So we're going to do that now. They're 7/16. I usually use an electric drill with a 7/16 thing on it, but I don't have that today, so I'm just going to use socket wrench. As we take each one of these out, again, a complete set is a bolt, a nut, 2 washers. If you don't get the second washer, it's probably stuck to the underside, and you just have to, pry it out. It should be just sticking on there fairly easily. So we're just going to take all these bolts out, set them in here so we don't lose them. Okay, we've got all the bolts out. They're here. And we're going to take these and just move them aside, because we're now going to make a fairly good mess. So we'll just set them over here. And set our wrench over. And what we'll see now is when I pull this cover off, you're going to see the fact that the water and the diatomaceous earth has gone out. We're going to just hose this out. And this part, which does the actual filtering, is a solid mess. We take this to the car wash and spray it off, because all these have to be completely clean. Diatomaceous earth, when it's wet, real harmless. When it's dry, when you're loading this thing next season, you don't want to breathe it in, because they're silicon-based diatoms. So we're just going to rinse this out with a hose, turn it upside down, because in the end we're going to store the bolts and stuff inside here, and the filter gets set onto the porch someplace just so that you don't have to cover it up and it won't freeze or anything else. Okay, so this is all rinsed out, turning upside down to just let it drain out, kind of dry out. Here's all the bolts, and here's the end plug that goes in this bottom drain here. Okay, and when we finish cleaning this thing and it dries out, you just set the thing together. You put all the bolts in the bottom of the thing. You don't obviously bolt it back together. That'd be a waste of time. Okay, so that finishes the filter, other than I have to take this to the car wash, and it's an incredible mess. I suggest you wear gloves when you're doing it, because you'll need to spray these things up close, and the spray can hurt your hands. So put on a pair of gloves, workman's gloves or whatever, and it just sprays all over the place, and you get each one clean. You shouldn't see any of the dirt in there, and those tubes should all be whitish colored. So you really have to spray it fairly good. Okay, now we're going to deal with the pump. Some people bring their pumps inside. I leave mine out here, and we'll cover it with an old tarp, which is kind of thick and rugged. So all we're going to do is we're going to wind up that cord around this thing, really just so this doesn't get down in any snow or water or wherever where it could corrode. You don't do anything with the connections of these, just leave them alone. We do have to open up this strainer part, clean it out, and there's 2 drain plugs in it, which I'll show you. We have to drain the water out of it to make sure that it doesn't freeze during the winter. Okay, here's the strainer basket. So you turn these and you get them loose enough, and if you push down on the edge here, because they're against a fairly thick rubber gasket, so you push down on the edge. If you keep turning on these, they'll completely unscrew, but all you have to do is do that, and then you lift up on this. See how it goes in the back and goes down, and then you tighten it to make the seal. Okay, this is the seal all around here. So when you put the top back on, just make sure that this is in the slot, because if you screw up this seal, you tend to suck in a lot of air here and you get all sorts of bubbles. So we're going to take this strainer basket out and we'll clean it. And normally we store it over in here so that this thing is actually empty when we're done. Okay? Our next step is to take out the 2 drain plugs from here. One of the plugs drains the basket, the other drains anything that might be in the pump. So there's one here, right there, which you can fit a wrench over if you have the right wrench size, or a large screwdriver. And then there's one in the front, which again, the same kind of plug. So I'm going to loosen those now. We'll try to do it live here. I'm going to try the fat screwdriver method, see if that works. So I take a big screwdriver, stick it into the slot on it, and it's not working at all. So I'm going to have to find the right wrench for it. Turns out a 9/16 inch wrench is the right size. And I put it down here on this little drain plug. These are plastic, so you can go easy on them. You know, you don't tighten them real hard. If they leak a little bit, you can put some Teflon tape on them, just like you would on a pipe connection. Now when I pull this out, some water should squirt, we hope. See? That's water that's in the pump itself, which if you left in there, the pump can break. You notice this water isn't going down. The drain for that is in the front. These, again, these things, if you lose them, they'd be in big trouble. So we're going to drain this, dry it with a towel, and throw these plugs in there so we know exactly where they are. So I'm going to set this plug over here, and I'm going to take the front plug out. Stop filming here. We remove this front plug, the rest of the water's going to squirt out there, and that's where we're draining this thing out. And it'll have some junk left in it, you know, old leaves and stuff. But some of the water is below the drain plug opening, and that's why we dry this out with a towel. Okay? Okay, I dried out the inside, and I decided I'm going to put the basket in there. If you look at this basket on the that says front, so the thin edge part of this goes towards the front. There's no water in here, so we don't have any problem with freezing. We put the 2 drain plugs in here. I want to remind you again, these are plastic, so be careful putting them in. Don't tighten them like you would tighten metal, because if you do strip them or break it or something, and see, that's just a little piece of Teflon tape. Let's put on there. Okay, we take this, we check that our seal here is good. We put this in like this, and you don't even have to tighten it down. I just press it down like this. There's no reason that it has to be super tight or anything, because you're not sealing anything. Okay, so literally all I do now is take and cover this with a tarp. And again, just make sure the plug is not down where it can get wet or whatever. So I probably move this around so it's up high, because you know, you get snow and stuff in here. Okay, so just do it one of those. And the stuff that we use to cover the heater and the pump are up here. This is waxed canvas, you know, World War II vintage. I like it because it's heavy and it won't blow up in the snow and wind and like that. This, I've got some foam inside here and some rope. We cover the heater with it and just tie ropes around it so that it can't flap away. Again, I just put the tarp on here. I've covered that hose that's sitting on the cinder block and goes all the way down into the concrete. I've covered up the pump and the motor pretty well. Put down a couple of rocks to ensure that it stays down. Simple as that. Okay, inside the green tarp is this a couple of layers of just foam. I lay these over the top of the heater, especially covering the front where the display is, to make sure nothing could hit it and damage those displays. They're fairly fragile. So now we're just going to put the green tarp over it, and we're going to tie it with ropes to keep it from flapping around and coming off. So just kind of tie it towards the top and then tie it down lower. Try to get it around below where those connections are on the far side of it. But that's it. It'll be fine for the winter. Okay, so now we're looking at what else do we do? Here's maybe the most critical thing of the whole system that we do, and that is I don't lower the water in the pool. Done that for 20 years. The guy that installed the pool said he had done it for much longer than that. Never had any problem. But what you have to do is you have to guard against freezing in your skimmer body. So what we do here is we open this. We pull out the basket, which we'll store just in the little cupboard over there. We take a 1 gallon shock container with the cap on it, turn it upside down and wedge it into here, and it basically absorbs any expansion from the ice in this little circle. If you didn't do that, you could crack the sides here. I like to take the label off the bottle because that's loose plastic and you don't want plastic ending up in your hoses. So I'm going to take this label off and then I'll show you what's stuck in. Okay, gallon jug, I had to scrub the label off with hot water. Some of them have a plastic label that slips off. That's a lot easier. You just don't want a label sitting in here all winter because again, if it goes down into the pipe, it's not good. So basically you take the gallon jug, push it in here and just have it go down and catch in under the lip. So it's sitting like that. Okay, it's wedged in there and under the lip of the skimmer, and we put the cover back on so nobody trips. That protects this area from freezing and breaking. So from here, we're just going to go to, okay, what else has to be done and put away? This basket, skimmer basket, goes into this little closet area over here. Okay, so that's in there. We take the end. Oh, I get there. Okay, that's about it. This pole can actually sit out here. It won't hurt it at all. So I'm going to take this pipe and take that out to the shed. Okay, so the pipe is in here in the shed. The diving board is down here. That didn't get installed this year, nor did the steps that go at the other end. They hang from here. But all that stuff goes to the pool. And this is the box of diatomaceous earth, which I think we need more for next season.